A year ago, there was that weird meat shortage, which came closely on the heels of the incredibly stressful toilet paper shortage. In my part of the country, there were long lines to get into grocery stores most days, and getting food was no small matter. I found myself fantasizing about that thing they have on Star Trek where you tell the computer what you want and it magically appears. Hologram food. I think Harry Potter has a similar thing. There's an incantation and you can just make the food appear. You don't have to worry about where it comes from or how to prepare it or what to do about it. It's just there. The food supply chain challenge in my part of the country last spring wasn't a real crisis for me, and I don't for a second want to pretend that it was, because my family had food and we could stand in the long lines when we needed to, and we even figured out how to do online grocery shopping, which was a whole new world for me. Online grocery shopping is weird though, and I'll tell you why. You put things you want on your list and then you submit it, and what you get may or may not be what you asked for on the list because they do substitutions. This is how it came to pass that I became the possessor of a very massive bag of frozen tater tots. I had asked for fingerling potatoes. I had enough tater tots to feed the entire town's population of kindergartners, I'm sure. But I had to rethink my dinner plans and scrap whatever I was going to cook because I don't have a recipe that calls for 100 tater tots. This wasn't a real problem, and I don't want to pretend it was, but it did become something I fixated on. It was for me a symbol of how upside down the world was, how upside down my life was. I would stand in the kitchen and try to figure out what we were going to eat with this random collection of groceries we had on hand. The problem that kept me up very late at night wasn't the tater tots. I didn't worry about what I was going to feed my family because we're fine. My real problem was, what on earth was I going to feed my parish? How in the world was I going to take care of them? Everything, literally everything I knew how to do was unavailable to me. My entire priesthood has been spent being in the same room with actual people, feeding them with holy food and drink. That's what we do. But then the bishop said it wasn't safe and we couldn't do it anymore. So I had to figure out what to do. How was I going to feed these people without any key ingredients? I didn't sleep deeply at night, and by day I would sit in the empty church staring at the empty pews, knowing that my parish was starving. Anxiety was high and we were in lockdown and they were starving and I didn't have anything to give them. The people are hungry, I told Jesus. I have nothing to feed them. Jesus looked at pitiful me. Heaven knows it's not the first time he had to bail out a disciple. And Jesus said to me the same thing he said to his disciples on that day when 5,000 people crashed his day off. You give them something to eat. You. Jesus says that to the church and all her members all the time. Jesus especially says that to preachers every day. You give them something to eat. You do it. The instructions are incredibly simple, but they're also impossible. You have to gather up whatever you can find, and then you pray, and you hold it up, whatever it is that you have gathered and found, and you ask God to bless it, and then you break it open. You have to do that part so you can give it away. That's how it works. It's something maybe about the praying or the blessing or the gathering or the breaking. I don't think there's one secret ingredient. I only know that you have to do all of that. if you're going to feed the people. You have to gather and you have to pray and you have to ask God's blessing, and then you have to break open. Jesus doesn't make food appear out of thin air. He didn't 2,000 years ago. He didn't use a magic spell that day to make food magically appear, and he doesn't do it today. On that day, he used lunch, somebody's lunch that someone's mother had the wherewithal to pack that day. Other days, he uses fragments of holy texts that you've been pondering. A passing thought you had while walking your dog. A small scrap of something that you discovered when you were arguing with Jesus or with your therapist or with your spiritual director. Whatever it is, the process is exactly the same. You take it, whatever it is, and you pray, and you ask God to bless it, and then you break it open so that you can give it away. You will have to do this again and again and again and again in your preaching life, and you will have to do it with weird and random ingredients, like having several pounds of frozen tater tots when you had hoped for fingerling potatoes. You'll have to do it when you're very tired sometimes. And you will definitely have to do it when you're scared sometimes. Like when you're on camera and you don't want to be. Or you're in a pulpit that's much too big for you or too intimidating for you. You might have to do it outside on the front lawn where who knows is going to walk by and see you. I don't know where you're going to end up feeding people. I only know that you're going to feed people. People are starving, so you give them something to eat. You are all here because at some point along the way, you heard Jesus say exactly that to you. You give them something to eat. So you sacrificed your first week of summer after a global pandemic when you actually could travel. You sacrificed it to sit in front of a device and try to figure it out, how you were going to feed the people. Other than the tater tots, the most random thing I have acquired in this past year has been this, and I'm going to be cheesy enough to show it to you because I'm very proud of it. This is a cube that my sister gave me. It's a regift. And inside this cube, I kid you not, are 52 Joel Osteen sermons. They're right there on demand. You press the button and out they come. And if you are really pushed for time, you can press the daily affirmation button and have Joel affirm you.
I declare that you have a sound mind filled with good thoughts, not thoughts of defeat, but thoughts of faith. You are.
Isn't that awesome? That's mine. You can probably get one on Amazon. On my most broken days, on my most exhausted days, I would sit in my office with this dumb box and randomly press buttons and let Joel fill this room with things that aren't food, but they have the illusion of food. In truth, I can only really listen for a few seconds at a time because I know that nothing in here is actually going to feed the people in my care. But the fantasy is a good one, something where you can just press the button and you're done. You will find your own temptations along the way, your own version of hologram food, food that comes with just a push of a button. It may look like offering platitudes, impressive sounding quotations that make you sound incredibly erudite, feel-good stories that have no grit or dirt on them at all, saying so many things that you end up saying nothing at all. All of that is hologram food, and all of it is very tempting, but resist the temptation because the people are starving. Instead, you need to start with whatever small scrap you have. Likely you will be like the disciples who held up that meager lunch that they found and they showed it to Jesus and they said, "This is all we have. And obviously, this is not enough." You'll say the same thing. "This is all I have. And obviously, it's not enough." And you will be wrong, like they were, because it will be enough somehow. This glorious story ends with a mess on the lawn. They cleaned up the mess, which is nice, but the mess was there, which is why we had to hear how many bushels it took to clean it up. The lawn was littered with scraps, so many scraps it could feed an entire other multitude. Hologram food does not leave crumbs or fish bones or crusts behind. Hologram food is incredibly tidy. Only messy food, only real food can make that kind of a display in its wake. The kind of real food that people are starving for. So thank goodness. Thank goodness you are all here. Really, thank goodness. Thank goodness you are here, and thank goodness you are brave, and you are so brave. I've seen it this week. You are brave. And we are thankful for that because the people are starving. You give them something to eat.